I was halfway through Christmas dinner when my phone buzzed with a message that stopped everything. Get up and leave. Don't say a word. At first I thought it was a mistake, until I saw who sent it. Dylan, my sister's ex. I hadn't heard from him in months. But what he told me next made my blood run cold. My own parents were planning something unthinkable. Something I wouldn't have believed if it weren't for the way he said it, low and certain. Don't drink anything. They're going to use your fingerprint. That was the moment I knew. This dinner wasn't just a reunion. It was a setup. If you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from. It had been 4 months since I last heard from my family. No texts, no missed calls, not even a forwarded meme from my dad. Just silence. A silence that felt heavy but in some twisted way peaceful. Then out of nowhere a message popped up from my mom. We're having Christmas dinner. Just the family. Hope you'll come. I stared at the screen for a long time. There was no, I miss you, or let's talk. Just an invitation tucked inside layers of unspoken history. I almost didn't respond. Part of me had finally begun to accept the distance. But another part, the part that still remembered stocking stuffers and carols playing on the old stereo, wanted to believe things might be different this time. So I said yes. The drive back to my parents' house was long, quiet, and filled with memories I hadn't asked to remember. I gripped the wheel tightly, watching snow gather on the windshield, thinking about all the times they'd asked for help. At first it was little things: Lily needs a new textbook, she's stressed about tuition. Can you help with rent just this once? But it had snowballed into something so much bigger. $12,000. That was the number that finally broke everything. And the silence that followed my refusal was louder than any argument we'd ever had. Still, it was Christmas. If there was ever a time for people to soften, this had to be it. Maybe the months apart had changed something in them. Maybe they'd finally seen things from my side. Maybe, just maybe, this dinner would be about more than manipulation and obligation. I pulled into the familiar driveway and sat for a minute before getting out. The house looked the same as always. Warm yellow lights glowing in the windows, a plastic wreath on the door snow dusting the shrubs. I took a breath, adjusted my coat, and stepped onto the porch. The door opened before I could knock. My mom was standing there, dressed in red with a glittering snowflake pin on her collar. Hannah. Just in time, she said, like we hadn't gone months without speaking. We're about to sit down. Come on in. I forced a smile. Hi, Mom. The warmth of the house hit me instantly. Both literal and performative. Everything was decorated to the nines: garlands, along the staircase, stockings, over the fireplace, cinnamon-scented candles flickering in the corners. A Christmas playlist hummed softly in the background, and the table in the dining room was already set. My dad emerged from the kitchen, drying his hands on a dish towel. Hey there, he said, his voice even but unsure. We hadn't spoken since the money fallout. He stepped forward slightly, then paused like he wasn't sure whether to hug me or offer a handshake. We settled for a nod. I could feel the awkwardness clawing at the edges of every gesture. Lily's already at the table, Mom said brightly, as if announcing it would make it less uncomfortable. I glanced into the dining room. Sure enough, Lily was there, scrolling through her phone like the room bored her. She looked up when I walked in, barely meeting my eyes, before dropping her gaze back to the screen. Hey, she mumbled. Hey, I replied. I noticed my seat had already been pulled out for me. A napkin was neatly folded on the plate. A glass sat to the right. Cranberry juice, my mom's go-to choice for me, even though I hadn't drunk it in years. You still like cranberry, right? She asked with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I nodded. Yeah, thanks. I took my seat, smoothing my napkin over my lap. The room was cozy, filled with the smells of roasted turkey, spiced yams, and baked green beans, but the warmth didn't quite reach me. It was like sitting in a perfectly staged photograph of a family gathering. All the elements were there, but none of it felt real. Mom brought in a tray of bread rolls and sat down. Dad carved the turkey. Small talk floated across the table like a script no one quite believed in. "How's work?" Dad asked, already buttering a roll. "It's fine," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "You still in the same apartment Mom followed passing the mashed potatoes?" "Yeah," I said, scooping a bit onto my plate. "Same place." Lily perked up long enough to mention a coworker of hers who got locked in the office bathroom the day before. It wasn't funny, but I chuckled anyway. I knew my role here. Quiet, agreeable, unproblematic. The daughter who didn't stir things up. I could play that part. I had played it for most of my life. But underneath all that, something gnawed at me. That same tightness in my chest I used to feel whenever my parents said, "She's your sister, help her out." That instinct to brace myself for whatever quiet obligation might come next, it was still there. And yet I wanted to believe. I wanted to believe we could eat one holiday meal like a real family where love wasn't transactional and my presence didn't come with a price. I looked around the table, my mom smiling too widely, my dad watching me like he was trying to read something in my expression, Lily twirling her fork eyes back on her phone. It was Christmas, but something still felt off. Too quiet. Too curated. And still I stayed, because part of me was waiting for what I wasn't sure. Maybe for the other shoe to drop. Or maybe just maybe for proof that it wouldn't. I was halfway through a spoonful of green beans when my phone buzzed in my lap. It was just one buzz. Silent, discreet. I glanced down beneath the table expecting some holiday ad or maybe a weather alert about the snow picking up outside. Instead, it was a message from a number I didn't recognize. "Get up and leave. Don't say a word." I blinked. My stomach turned not from the food but from the weight those 7 words carried. I reread the message twice. There were no emojis, no name, no punctuation beyond the periods. It wasn't casual or panicked. It was cold, intentional, like someone was trying very hard to sound calm while shouting through the screen. I looked up from my lap, trying to keep my expression neutral. Across the table, Eleanor was asking Lily about a holiday market downtown. Thomas was buttering another roll. Lily didn't look up from her phone. Everything looked completely normal. Almost too normal. But something wasn't right. I'd been sitting in a haze of nostalgia and wariness ever since I stepped through the front door, but now that haze sharpened. My heart started to pound in my ears. I swallowed and tried to focus on breathing. My eyes scanned the table. The cranberry juice in front of me untouched. The same glass I'd agreed to, without thinking the one my mom poured for me like it was a tradition. Like I was still the same obedient daughter I used to be. Had I ever told them I didn't drink anymore? Not just casually refused, but really explained. Probably not, because even when I did, they rarely listened. The phone buzzed again. Another message from the same number. "Don't drink anything." My skin prickled. I placed my spoon gently on the plate and steadied my voice. "Excuse me," I said softly. "I need to use the restroom." No one looked up, not even Lily, not even a pause in the conversation. Just the hum of small talk and the clinking of silverware. I stood, slipped my phone into my sweater pocket, and walked calmly out of the room. My legs were steady, but only because I was forcing them to be. As soon as I reached the stairs, I quickened my pace slightly, heading to the upstairs bathroom. I needed a door that locked, one that didn't stick or creak or leave me feeling exposed. Once inside, I locked the door, sat down on the edge of the bathtub, and pulled out my phone. My hands were cold and a little shaky. I stared at the messages again. "Get up and leave. Don't say a word. Don't drink anything." I hit call. It rang once. Then a voice answered low and urgent. "You're still there." "Who is this?" I asked. A pause. Then, "It's Dylan." I froze. Dylan, Lily's ex. The guy who used to come around for Sunday dinners, who once brought a bottle of wine and a plant that my mom pretended to like I hadn't seen him in over a year. Last I heard, they broke up for good. "What the hell is going on?" I asked. His voice was strained, like he was whispering from a place he shouldn't be in. "You need to leave," he said. "Just get up and go. Don't eat, don't drink, don't argue. Just go." My heart skipped. "Why?" What is this? I can't explain everything right now, he said. I shouldn't even be calling. But I heard something. Something you need to know. Then tell me, I demanded. Why are you even involved in this? He sighed. I was at their place 2 nights ago. I came to drop off some stuff Lily left at my apartment. We talked for a bit and she left the room to take a call. I stayed in the kitchen. I wasn't trying to snoop, I swear. But I heard your mom and Lily talking in the hallway. Your dad joined in too. My grip tightened around the phone. They were planning something Dylan said, voice low. Something about getting into your bank account, using your phone, using your fingerprint. They said you usually black out after one drink, that they'd slip something in. A deep, cold silence fell between us. My mouth went dry. I haven't touched the juice, I said quietly. Good. Don't. But why would they? They didn't say everything. Just that they needed access. Your mom said you wouldn't help Lily and they had no choice. I shut my eyes, my brain struggling to process what I was hearing. I don't understand, I said. Why call me? Why help me now? Dylan's answer came slow, like it hurt to say, because it's not right. Whatever happened between me and Lily, I wouldn't wish this kind of betrayal on anyone. And you always treated me with respect. I figured you deserved a warning. A lump formed in my throat. Please, he added. Don't drink anything. Get out of there. I nodded before realizing he couldn't see me. Okay, be careful, Hannah. The line went dead. I sat there in the bathroom gripping the phone like it was the only real thing left in the world. For a long minute, I didn't move. The sound of distant holiday music floated up the stairs, muffled through the closed door. A laugh echoed faintly from downstairs. The sounds of a picture-perfect family gathering. But now everything had shifted. My family, my own parents, were planning to drug me, to use my body like a key to steal what I'd worked for. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I didn't look different. Same sweater, same soft curls pulled back, same cautious eyes. But something inside me hardened. I stood up, unlocked the door, and walked back down the hall with a calm I didn't entirely feel. The plan had changed. I couldn't just walk out and pretend this never happened. No. Now I needed to know how far they were willing to go. I stood in the hallway outside the bathroom for a few moments longer, letting the words Dylan had just said sink into my bones. The hallway smelled like cinnamon and fake pine from a plug-in diffuser. Holiday music played faintly from the speakers downstairs. If I didn't know any better, I might have believed this was just another cozy Christmas evening. But I knew better now. They were planning to drug me. To wait until I was unconscious, then use my fingerprint to unlock my phone and access my bank account. My parents, my sister. The people who'd known me since birth. People I had once believed would protect me. I leaned against the wall, closed my eyes for a second, and tried to breathe through the tightness in my chest. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was how calm they were about it. How methodical. Like it wasn't even a question. Just a task. A family project. Downstairs, the sound of silverware tapping plates floated upward. I imagined Eleanor wiping her hands on her apron, Thomas pouring himself another glass of wine, Lily pretending not to care while watching me from the corner of her eye. Maybe they were already wondering what was taking me so long. I looked at my phone again, half expecting another message from Dylan, but there was nothing. I replayed the call in my mind. He had heard them. Not rumors, not guesses. He had heard my parents talk about putting something in my drink, about using my fingerprint, about getting into my bank account. And still he called me. Why are you telling me this? I had asked, my voice trembling with something between fear and disbelief. Because it's gone too far, Dylan had said. His voice hadn't been dramatic or apologetic. It was just honest. I know what kind of person Lily can be. I let things slide before when they didn't affect me. But this drugging you, trying to steal from you, that's not just messed up. It's criminal. You deserve to know. There had been a pause then. A moment where neither of us spoke. "Thank you," I had said softly, unsure of what else to offer. "You need to protect yourself, Hannah," he said. "I don't think they're going to stop until they get what they want." He was right. That was the terrifying part. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was the climax of a pattern that had started years ago. The slow erosion of boundaries, the constant justifications, the emotional debt they insisted I owed them. Well, not tonight. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, squared my shoulders, and walked back downstairs. Everything was just as I had left it. The plates were still full. The cranberry juice still glowed ruby red in the candlelight. Eleanor looked up when I entered and smiled as if nothing was wrong. "Feeling better, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice syrupy. "Yeah," I said, nodding. "Just needed a moment. Holiday meals always hit heavier than I expect." Thomas chuckled from across the table. "Too much stuffing, huh? Happens every year?" I smiled politely and took my seat again, careful not to let my hands shake as I unfolded my napkin. I glanced at Lily. She was still staring at her phone, her expression unreadable. I wondered if she knew I had left the room with more than an upset stomach. I looked at the glass in front of me. The juice shimmered under the light like it always had, familiar and innocent. I'd never liked it all that much, but it had become a tradition, one I never thought to question. Until now. I reached for the glass and lifted it slightly. My mom watched me. Just a flash of anticipation behind her eyes. My dad had paused mid-chew. Lily's gaze flicked up just for a second. I smiled. "Tastes like I remember," I said softly. Then I set the glass back down without drinking. Nobody said anything. They returned to their conversation, but I could feel the tension shift. They thought I had taken the bait. And that was exactly what I wanted, because now I had a plan. There was no way I could confront them head-on. Not without proof, not without giving them the chance to twist it into another story. Hannah, the dramatic one, the overreactor, the ungrateful daughter, I had heard all of it before, and I wasn't about to hear it again. I slipped my phone out beneath the table, opened the voice memo app, and pressed record. Then I turned off the screen and left the phone face down in my lap. No blinking light, no indicator, just a black rectangle quietly listening. I didn't need them to admit everything in a confession. I just needed enough to show intent, enough to show that what they were doing wasn't just manipulative. It was calculated, coordinated, criminal. I let the conversation flow around me, nodding at the right moments, smiling when expected. Eleanor asked me about my job, about whether I had any vacation plans. Thomas brought up a news story about flight cancellations. Lily stayed mostly silent, occasionally muttering a one-word reply when addressed. I played my part perfectly. The obedient daughter, the peacekeeper, the one who still came home for Christmas even after being cut off for saying no. And as I sat there, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to walk away. I wasn't going to storm out or call them out mid-meal. That would give them control. Let them shape the narrative. Let them rewrite history the way they always had. No, this time I was going to document everything. Quietly, carefully, thoroughly, because this time I wasn't just the victim. I was the witness. I was the one who saw it coming. And I was the one who would make sure it didn't happen again. As I sat back down at the dinner table, the scent of cinnamon and rosemary in the air, I felt the weight of memories pressing against the edges of my mind. I kept my face relaxed, my smile soft, my tone warm. But inside, I was slipping into the past, into a timeline paved with quiet patterns, where expectations weren't shouted but silently installed, where guilt dressed itself as love and sacrifice, came standard with my last name. It started with $5. Every Friday when Lily and I were kids, our parents gave us each a crisp $5 bill, a small allowance, just enough for a candy bar and a cheap toy from the school book fair. I always saved mine. Maybe I was just wired that way. I liked the security of watching it grow in the little zippered pouch I kept under my bed. Lily, on the other hand, spent hers by Saturday afternoon. Glitter pens, bubble gum, stickers she'd lose by Monday. It wasn't a problem, of course. Kids are allowed to spend freely. But the problem started when she ran out and turned to me. She'd pout, stare at the floor, say she wanted a soda at lunch but didn't have money. And every time I hesitated, Mom would step in. "She doesn't have any left." "You still do. Don't be selfish. Not a rule. Just a suggestion." But I heard it. I heard it loud and clear. If I saved, I was expected to share. If she overspent, I was expected to cover the gap. That expectation grew with us. By middle school, Lily knew that if she whined long enough, someone would make me give her what she wanted. It didn't matter what it was. Movie tickets, nail polish, concert shirts. If Lily wanted it and I had the money, it became my responsibility to make her feel included. In high school, I got my first part-time job working weekends at a pharmacy. I stocked shelves, ran the register, cleaned the break room. It was the first time I had something that felt like mine. I bought my own jeans, my own phone case, my own shampoo, and for a while it felt like freedom. But even then, the pattern followed me. Lily didn't work. She was younger and no one expected her to. But when she wanted something extra, they turned to me. She really wants to see that movie with her friends. "You've got your paycheck now, right?" "She's been having a hard week." "Be a good sister. Be a good sister." That was the phrase they used to dress up manipulation. I wore it like a uniform. By the time I left for college, I thought I had finally created some distance. I was 2 states away living off ramen and campus coffee, juggling coursework and a part-time campus job. And for a little while, the quiet was liberating. But then I graduated. I got a junior developer position at a tech company. Entry-level pay, nothing glamorous, but it paid rent and let me make student loan payments on time. I was barely scraping by, but in their eyes, I had made it. The calls started again. The texts. The guilt wrapped in cheerful emojis. "So, she's starting college. Could you help with her enrollment deposit? Books are really expensive these days. She's so stressed, and it would mean a lot if you chipped in." They always made it sound like Lily was fragile, like my help would save her from breaking, like if I didn't say yes, I'd be the reason she failed. So I said yes, over and over again. But the more I gave, the more they asked. And not once did it feel like I had a choice. My bank account became their safety net. I stopped buying things for myself, skipped dinners with coworkers, turned down trips. I told myself it was just a phase, that things would even out, that one day Lily would take care of herself. She never did. Then came the call. It was early evening in late October. I had just gotten home from work, kicked off my shoes, and reheated leftover lasagna when my mom's name flashed on my screen. I answered, expecting a casual chat. Instead, I got urgency, pressure, the tone I knew too well. "Hannah, we need your help. It's serious. What happened?" I asked, heart rate already rising. "It's Lily. She's in trouble. Financial trouble." A pit formed in my stomach. "How much?" There was a pause, like they were trying to frame it gently. $12,000. I nearly dropped my fork. $12,000, I repeated. "She made some bad decisions," my mom said. "She's young. She didn't know better." I asked to speak to Lily directly. At first they resisted, but eventually she picked up. Her voice was smaller than usual, but not ashamed. "Not really. I was gambling," she admitted. "I lost. I didn't mean for it to get this bad." I couldn't breathe for a second. "Gambling," I said slowly. "You work in finance." "I know," she said. "That's why it's so bad. If anyone finds out, I'm done. No company will ever hire me again." There was a long silence. "Has this happened before?" I asked. She didn't answer. I didn't need her to. Something in me shifted, like a door that had always been unlocked finally clicked shut. "No," I said. "No. Not later. Not part of it. Not alone. Not ever. I've been helping you for as long as I can remember. But this I won't cover it. Not this time. Not again." She called me cold. She told me I didn't understand what was at stake. Maybe she was right, but maybe I finally just didn't care. After that, everything went quiet. no calls, no texts, not from Lily, not from Mom, not from Dad. It was the kind of silence that tried to make you feel guilty, tried to make you come crawling back. But I didn't crawl. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. And they didn't check in. Until last week. Until the Christmas dinner invitation. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a trap dressed up in tinsel. And this time I wasn't going to step into it blind. When I returned to the dining room, the conversation hadn't changed. It was still surface-level chatter about traffic weather and which neighbor had the brightest Christmas lights this year. Everything felt so calculated, like everyone was sticking to a script they'd rehearsed too many times. The cranberry juice was still sitting at my place untouched. The deep red liquid looked innocent, familiar, comforting even. My mother had always poured it for me during holidays, acting like it was some sweet tradition that connected us. But it wasn't about tradition anymore. Not tonight. I sat back down slowly, taking a moment to ease into my seat, as if I were just tired, not aware of the setup unfolding around me. My phone, now resting in my lap, was already recording. Audio only, no light, no sign. I'd started it in the bathroom before coming back down. Every word, every shift in tone, every pause was being documented. Eleanor reached over and gently pushed the glass a few inches closer to me. "Here you go, sweetheart," she said with a warm smile. "You've always loved cranberry." I smiled back just as warm. "Thanks, Mom." I lifted the glass, cradling it gently in my hand. My eyes flicked around the table. Thomas looked relaxed, maybe too relaxed, watching me with vague interest as he chewed. Lily didn't look up from her phone. Her thumb swiped steadily across the screen, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. They were all waiting. They were pretending not to, but I knew better. I brought the glass close to my lips and tilted it just enough to make it seem like I took a sip. Then, lowering it slightly, I gave a small nod and set it back down. Still just as tart, I said, letting the words float in the air casually. Eleanor beamed, clearly pleased. "It's the same brand we always get. You know the one you liked when you were little?" I nodded, then reached under the table with my napkin, pretending to wipe my mouth. In reality, I gently tipped the glass and let a slow trickle of juice pour out, hidden by the edge of the tablecloth. The thick carpet underneath soaked it up immediately. I let just enough spill to look convincing enough to explain why the glass would end up nearly empty if anyone checked later. When I straightened back up, I put on a faint smile and let my shoulders slump slightly. "I don't know," I murmured. "I think I might have eaten too fast. I'm feeling a little off." Thomas leaned forward. "You okay?" "Just a bit lightheaded," I said, rubbing my temple. "Do you mind if I lie down for a bit?" "Of course not," Eleanor said, already rising from her seat. "The couch is right there. Come on, honey." She walked around the table and placed a hand on my back as I stood. It was too soft, too rehearsed. The gesture of a mother helping her daughter, except now I knew the real reason behind the concern. They weren't trying to comfort me. They were making sure I made it to the next stage of the plan. Thomas grabbed a throw blanket from the recliner and draped it over my shoulders. Lily even looked up and offered a half-hearted, "You okay?" like she was required to participate in the act. I nodded slowly, lowering myself onto the couch with deliberate effort, mimicking dizziness. I leaned back, closed my eyes halfway, and exhaled. "Just need a few minutes," I mumbled. "No rush," Eleanor said sweetly. "We'll be right here." I shifted my body slightly and let my head rest on the cushion. My breathing slowed and I let my arms go limp. I imagined what I must have looked like from their angle, Hannah, the reliable one, finally letting her guard down, finally trusting again. Perfect. In the background, the audio on my phone was still running. I could feel the device pressed lightly against my thigh, hidden beneath the blanket. I had made sure to disable every visible notification, every potential interruption. It wouldn't beep. It wouldn't light up. And it wouldn't stop until I told it to. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then I heard the shuffle of footsteps. "Is she asleep?" Eleanor whispered. Yeah, Lily replied after a brief pause. She's out. A longer silence followed. Then Thomas's voice. Okay, let's do this quickly. I lay perfectly still, my pulse racing, but my face serene. It took everything I had not to flinch as I felt fingers carefully wrap around my hand. They lifted my thumb with slow, practiced motion and pressed it to the home button of my phone. A soft vibration. Unlocked. She keeps everything in here, Lily whispered. Her passwords, her banking apps. It's all saved. Routing number, Thomas asked quietly. She has a document, Eleanor said. Search for the finance folder. She labeled it something boring, like receipts or statements. Tapping sounds filled the room. I kept my breathing steady. Not all of it, Thomas said. Just enough to settle it. Settle what Lily asked. If we take everything, she'll know, he replied. If it's subtle, she might think she did it herself. That's why we needed her to sleep through it, Eleanor added. She always blacks out after a sip or two. There it was. Confirmation. Out loud. From all of them. The betrayal was complete. Clean. Unapologetic. Wait, Lily said. It's asking for a code. What? Eleanor's voice sharpened. Two-step verification, Lily muttered. She changed it. Thomas let out a low curse. Try the Notes app, Eleanor said. She might have saved backup codes. More tapping. A pause. Nope. Still locked out. Lily said. Damn it, Thomas muttered. Then silence. Just put the phone back, Eleanor said. We'll figure something else out. The phone was returned to my lap. No apologies, no remorse, just a hiccup in their process. I waited another minute before shifting slightly. I blinked my eyes open slowly, as if surfacing from a dream. Sorry, I murmured. I think I blacked out for a second. Weird. All three looked at me with feigned concern. You sure you're okay? Thomas asked. Yeah, I said, sitting up gently. I think I just need some fresh air. I stood, clutching the phone loosely in my hand, the way someone might after a nap. My heart was still thudding in my chest, but my expression didn't show it. Actually, I added, I think I'm going to head home. Got work early tomorrow. They didn't protest. They smiled, nodded. Thanks for coming, Eleanor said. Drive safe. Let us know when you get home, Thomas added. I walked to the door, hugged each of them in turn. My mother, my father, my sister, one by one like it was just another family holiday. And then I stepped outside into the cold night, phone in hand, and walked calmly to my car. Everything I needed was already recorded. The room was dim lit mostly by the glow of twinkling Christmas lights wrapped around the banister and the soft flicker of candles on the table. The heater hummed in the background, a low drone beneath the muffled holiday music still playing from the living room speaker. I lay motionless on the couch, my body slack beneath the blanket, my breathing calm and even. From where I lay, I could see the shadow of the Christmas tree reaching toward the ceiling, its ornaments glinting faintly in the low light. Inside, every nerve in my body was awake. I could hear everything. The subtle creak of the floor as someone stepped forward. A quiet exhale. A shift in tone no longer casual or performative. The change was so stark, it was almost chilling. This wasn't a family gathering anymore. It was a heist. And I was the vault. Is she out? Eleanor's voice whispered just above a breath. She looks it, Lily replied. Her eyes haven't moved. Nothing twitched. She blacks out after 2 sips, remember, Thomas added. She probably didn't even feel it hit her. She didn't finish the whole glass, Lily said, a little uncertain. It was enough, Eleanor snapped softly. She's out. Let's go. I kept my eyelids still, my muscles loose. I wanted to scream, to jump up and shout that I heard every word. But I didn't. I needed them to keep going. I needed the truth to unfold exactly the way they intended it. A moment later I felt it, fingers wrapping around my hand. Gentle at first, almost careful. They lifted my thumb and pressed it against the phone's home button. I felt the soft vibration that confirmed the device had unlocked. "She's in," Lily whispered. There was a pause, then the sound of tapping. Quick, calculated, confident. Pages being swiped, apps being opened, then voices again. "Check under finance or statements," Eleanor instructed. "She always labels things so boring," Lily muttered. "Just look for anything with numbers." "I've got her banking app," Thomas said. "It's already logged in." "What about the routing number?" Eleanor asked. "Do we need that?" "No, if the accounts are linked, we just need the transfer details," Thomas replied. "Just take enough to cover Lily's debt," Eleanor added. "Not all of it. We don't want her to notice. She will," Lily said. "She checks her balance constantly. That's why we keep it small," Eleanor responded. "Subtle. She'll think she did it herself. Sleepwalking or something. She won't remember." My fingers itched to move. My jaw clenched behind the mask of stillness. This wasn't just theft. It was a coordinated invasion of my privacy, my safety, my personhood. And they weren't just doing it. They were doing it calmly, casually. Like this was just another household chore. "She always blacks out. I told you it works every time," Lily said again more confidently now. "We wouldn't have had to do this if she just said yes," Thomas mumbled. "She owes us," Eleanor whispered like she believed it. "We raised her. We took care of her. And she refuses to help her sister when she's drowning. She left us no choice." A few more taps, then a sudden shift in tone. "Wait," Lily said. "It's asking for a code." "What code?" Eleanor asked sharply. "Two-step verification," Lily muttered. She set it up. "We need a code from her authenticator app." A beat of silence. The kind of silence that follows a roadblock nobody prepared for. "Try her notes," Thomas said. "She might have saved backup codes. Tapping, swiping, nothing. Check her email. It's locked down. I can't get in." More silence. Then a low, frustrated sigh from Eleanor. "She's smarter than I thought." "She always was," Thomas said, sounding almost resentful. "Well, we can't do anything now," Lily added, her voice flat. "Everything's locked." Another pause. "Put the phone back," Eleanor said. I felt the device being slid gently into my lap, tucked beneath the blanket once again. No apologies, no remorse, no discussion of what they'd done, only frustration that it hadn't worked. I stayed still, listening as they slowly stepped away, returning to the dining room. I heard a chair slide a fork clink against a plate. The music continued to play, a soft carol humming through the silence that had settled. I waited. 30 seconds, a minute, long enough for them to settle back into their performance, long enough for the false calm to return. Then I opened my eyes. I blinked a few times slowly, as if waking from a deep nap. I let my head roll slightly to the side, then sat up, gently rubbing my temple. "Sorry," I said, my voice groggy. I must have passed out for a second. 3 pairs of eyes turned toward me. "You okay, Thomas?" asked, his tone suddenly gentle again. "Yeah, I think I just need some fresh air," I replied, pulling the blanket from my lap and standing up slowly. I cradled my phone in my hand like nothing had happened, like it hadn't just been used as a tool against me. My heart was pounding, but I kept my breathing steady. "Actually," I added, reaching for my coat, "I think I'm gonna head home." "Long day, early morning tomorrow." "Of course," Eleanor said quickly, rising from her seat. "Let me get you something for the road." "No, it's fine," I said, already stepping toward the front door. "Really." They followed me, offering vague, practiced well wishes. "Thanks for coming," Thomas said. "Text us when you get home." Eleanor added. Lily didn't speak. She stood at the edge of the dining room, arms folded, watching me with unreadable eyes. At the door, I turned back slightly. "Dinner was nice," I said. Then I opened the door, stepped outside, and let the cold air hit me like a reset button. My hands shook slightly as I unlocked the car. Once inside, I closed the door, placed my phone on the passenger seat, and stared straight ahead. The recording had captured everything. And this time I wasn't going to keep it to myself. The cold air outside hit me like a wave of truth, shocking in its clarity. The snow had begun to fall again, soft flurries landing silently on the windshield of my car as I slid into the driver's seat. For a long moment, I didn't move. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel while the phone lay on the passenger seat beside me. Still dark and quiet, but holding everything. I reached for it and unlocked the screen, heart pounding not with fear, but with a strange, measured calm. The recording was still going. I stared at the timer as it ticked past the 30-minute mark. Then I tapped to stop it and immediately backed it up to the cloud, my private storage folder, and an external drive I kept in the glove compartment. Just in case. I didn't know yet what the next steps would be, but I wasn't taking chances. Not after tonight. I sat in the car for a few more minutes, watching the windows fog up from my breath. My coat was still warm, the blanket's faint scent lingering on my sleeves. Fabric softener and something colder, sharper. Something I now associated with betrayal. I thought about what had just happened, how calmly they had done it. Not a trace of hesitation, not even a whisper of remorse. Just procedure. They had coordinated it like a group project, Thomas giving orders, Eleanor managing details, Lily chiming in perfectly at ease, my family working in tandem to rob me while pretending to care for me, and me, lying perfectly still as they exposed everything I needed to know. I should have been crying, angry, screaming, but I wasn't, not anymore. I'd moved past that sometime in the past hour. Or maybe I'd moved past it years ago when I first started realizing that being the dependable one didn't mean being respected. It meant being used. I finally started the car. The engine hummed to life, the dashboard lights flickering softly. I adjusted the heater and merged onto the snowy road with practiced ease like I was driving home from a normal family dinner. But nothing about this night had been normal. Back in the living room when I sat up on the couch and rubbed my temples, all three of them had turned to look at me like I was a puzzle they couldn't quite solve. I think I blacked out for a second. I had said voice hoarse but casual. Must have been the heat or something. I'm gonna head home. Eleanor had stood up quickly, too quickly, trying to regain control. Of course, honey. Do you need me to grab you anything? A slice of pie for the road? No, thanks, I said, forcing a soft smile. I'll be fine. Just need to sleep it off. Thomas had nodded, barely making eye contact. Lily had stayed seated, her arms crossed, her mouth pressed in a thin line. If she had anything to say, she swallowed it. I'd kept my movements slow and steady. Grabbed my coat from the hook by the door, slipped on my boots. The familiar routine made it easier to pretend that nothing had happened, that I hadn't just laid there and let them attempt to rob me, that I wasn't walking out of that house with a record of every whispered word they thought I'd never hear. Let us know when you get home. Eleanor had called after me as I opened the front door. I didn't respond, just nodded once mechanically and stepped into the night. Now, as I made my way down the dark streets of my childhood neighborhood, I realized this might be the last time I'd ever drive this route. The trees lining the road were wrapped in strands of white lights. Snow clung to mailboxes. Houses glowed warmly behind curtained windows. To anyone else, this street probably looked idyllic, safe. But to me, it had become a memory I was ready to leave behind. At the next red light, I pulled out my phone again and double-checked the recording file. Still intact. I renamed it, time-stamped it, and saved it under multiple file paths. Then I opened my bank app and reviewed my login history, confirming what I already knew. There had been multiple failed attempts to bypass two-step verification within the past hour. Each attempt was marked with exact timestamps that matched the audio perfectly. I took screenshots of everything. I knew what to do. The steps were clear. File a report. Submit the evidence. Let the system take it from there. But more than that, I knew I needed this. Not just for justice, but for closure. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let it slide. I wasn't going to rationalize their behavior or explain it away. I wasn't going to pretend it came from a place of love. It hadn't. What they did wasn't an act of desperation. It was a betrayal so deliberate it became surgical. And they had failed, because I had seen it coming, and this time I hadn't just braced for the blow, I had documented it. The streetlight turned green and I kept driving. Snow continued to fall heavier now, coating the roads in white. I turned on the wipers and watched them push away the flakes with mechanical persistence. In the stillness, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace exactly, but resolve. I thought about all the times I'd said yes when I wanted to say no. All the times I'd handed over money, time, space, energy. Because I thought that's what family meant. But family shouldn't be a job. It shouldn't be a contract you can't renegotiate. It shouldn't be a weight that drowns you every time someone else refuses to swim. And if you need to drug someone in order to get them to help you, that's not family. That's a crime. As I pulled into my apartment complex, the familiar hum of the street lamps overhead greeted me. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat in the silence for a moment longer. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't even sad. What I felt was something closer to clarity, like a window had opened and the air rushing in was finally clean. I grabbed my phone, locked it, and stepped out of the car. Tomorrow I'd go to the police station. Tomorrow I'd press play on that recording in front of someone who could do something about it. Tomorrow I'd say it out loud, but tonight I'd rest. Tonight I'd let the snow keep falling while the truth sat safe in my pocket. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had nothing left to explain. The next morning I woke before the sun. I hadn't set an alarm. I didn't need one. My mind had been running on a quiet, relentless loop all night long, even while I slept. I rose without hesitation, pulled on a sweater and jeans, and sat on the edge of my bed for a moment, staring at the soft light creeping through the blinds. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't shaking. If anything, I felt grounded, strangely calm. There was no dramatic inner monologue, no cinematic music playing in my head, just a quiet knowing it was time. I gathered the materials I had prepared the night before, my phone fully charged and backed up, a flash drive with a copy of the recording, a printed summary of my bank's access log showing the failed login attempts that matched the exact timestamps of the conversation on the audio file. It was all organized neatly in a folder I'd labeled with a single word evidence. I made myself a quick cup of coffee, then drove across town to the police station. It was a small plain building, nothing dramatic, just brick and gray paint, a row of dull windows, and a faded flag flapping slowly outside. I parked, stepped into the cold, and walked inside with steady strides like I was there to file for a parking permit or renew a license. No rush, no fear. The front desk was manned by a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and a badge pinned just above her heart. She looked up from her computer, her expression neutral but kind. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said calmly. "I need to report a crime." Her eyes narrowed just slightly enough to show interest. What kind of crime? I placed the folder on the counter between us. My family drugged me and tried to steal from me. I have a recording. She blinked once, then again. Her face didn't move much, but I could see the shift. Surprise mixed with professionalism. "Okay," she said slowly. "Let me get someone to speak with you." She picked up the phone and dialed a short extension, speaking in a low voice. Within minutes, a tall officer in a Navy uniform appeared and introduced himself as Officer Miller. He led me down a hallway to a small room with plain chairs and a metal table. It wasn't cold or intimidating, just functional. "Have a seat," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. "You said you were drugged." "Yes," I said. "On Christmas Eve?" "By my parents and my sister." He raised his eyebrows slightly but didn't interrupt. "They invited me over for dinner," I continued. "I got a warning text from someone I trust. I didn't drink what they gave me, but I pretended to. Then I recorded everything." I slid the flash drive across the table. He plugged it into a battered-looking laptop and clicked through the files. As the audio began to play, I watched his expression shift slowly, minute by minute, as the voices of Eleanor Thomas and Lily filled the room. I sat quietly as he listened. When the part came where they used my fingerprint, his hand paused over the mouse. When they discussed the bank app, the routing numbers, the verification codes, he leaned in. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. He listened to the entire thing from beginning to end. When the file stopped, he sat back and looked at me with a seriousness that told me everything I needed to know. "This is serious," he said. "I know." He nodded, then reached for a notepad. "Do you have documentation for the bank activity you mentioned?" I handed him the printed log. "This shows failed login attempts from your phone." "Yes." But I had already set up two-step authentication. They couldn't get past it. Smart move. I nodded once. I work in tech. I build systems to stop people from doing things like this. He let out a slow breath. "Good thing you do." He spent the next hour taking my full statement. No interruptions, no judgment, just detailed methodical documentation. He asked about my relationship with my family, about past patterns of financial control and emotional manipulation, and about the warning I'd received. I told him everything, even Dylan's name. He wrote it all down. When we finished, he said, "I'll be honest, most people in your position would never come forward, especially not against family." I looked him in the eye. I almost didn't. But they stopped being family when they decided I was just a resource. He didn't argue. He promised they would follow up immediately and asked me not to contact anyone involved while the report was under review. I agreed. 3 days later, I got the call. The case had been assigned to a detective. They had reviewed the evidence and deemed it sufficient to move forward. That afternoon, Eleanor, Thomas, and Lily were each served with formal notices and instructed to appear for questioning. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. 2 weeks after that, I was notified of the outcome. Eleanor was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and unlawful administration of a substance. Because she had no prior record and due to her age, the court sentenced her to 3 months of probationary house arrest, monitored electronically. She was also fined and ordered to attend counseling for manipulative abuse behaviors. Thomas and Lily were both found guilty of attempted biometric fraud and conspiracy to access a secured financial account without consent. They avoided jail time, but the court-imposed fines issued a permanent no-contact order and marked both of them with misdemeanor convictions that would remain on their records. None of them contested the charges. Not after hearing the recording. Not after seeing the login timestamps. Not after realizing that every step they took had been tracked and captured by the daughter they thought was sleeping. When the verdicts were handed down, I felt something shift inside me. Not victory, not joy, just release. Like I had finally put down a burden I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. I changed my number that week, blocked every mutual contact, froze my credit reports, wrote a new will. Not out of fear, but out of a desire to move forward with intention. My life no longer had space for ghosts who dressed up as parents. A few friends asked if I'd regret it later, if cutting off my family would hurt in the long run, but I didn't regret anything, because I had given them every chance, and when they used that chance to betray me in the most calculated, cruel way, I didn't meet them with rage. I met them with proof. I met them with clarity. And that was more powerful than any confrontation could ever be. The first thing I did after the sentencing was block every number I had memorized since childhood. Mom, Dad, Lily, group chats, emergency bypasses, gone. Then I changed my phone number altogether. I contacted my bank and requested a full security audit. I locked down every financial account, added multi-factor authentication with physical tokens, and froze my credit with all 3 major bureaus. I even rewrote my will. Not that I had much to leave behind, but I didn't want my name tangled with theirs in any legal capacity. It wasn't revenge. It was protection. For the first time in my life, I was choosing peace over performance, safety over silence, boundaries over guilt. I went through my apartment, tossing out the framed photos I used to keep on the bookshelf. Pictures of happier days. At least that's what I thought they were when I took them. Birthday candles, Christmas trees, matching pajamas. But now all I could see in those photos were illusions. I saw a girl trying to earn love by being easy, by being reliable, by not asking for too much. I wasn't that girl anymore. The space felt quieter in the days that followed, but it wasn't the lonely kind of quiet. It was clarity. There were no calls asking for help, no texts guilting me for saying no. I opened my fridge and knew that every single item inside it had been chosen by me for me. There were no hidden expectations tied to the groceries, no strings woven into the smallest decisions. I thought cutting them off would feel like a funeral, like grief I'd have to carry forever. But instead it felt like a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding had finally released. It felt like standing in a room with clean air after years of breathing something toxic. Words started trickling in through unexpected channels. A cousin on my dad's side, one I hadn't spoken to in years, sent me a message out of the blue. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. She just wrote, "I heard. You didn't deserve that. I'm sorry." Then a few weeks later she followed up with a piece of news. They sold the house. It wasn't just a move, it was survival. They had to sell it to cover the legal fees, fines, and debts they couldn't outrun anymore. The house I grew up in, the one I used to imagine bringing my future kids to visit someday, gone. I didn't feel anything. No sadness, no nostalgia, no ache in my chest. That house had stopped being home a long time ago. Apparently, Lily moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Eleanor and Thomas relocated to a relative's guest room out of state. None of it surprised me. Consequences have a way of pulling people apart when there's no loyalty holding them together. And Dylan, he disappeared from Lily's life entirely. I didn't know the full story and I didn't ask. A mutual acquaintance mentioned that he'd packed up and left just a few weeks after everything came to light. No big confrontation, no public fallout. Just a quiet exit. One day he was there and the next he wasn't. Honestly, I respected that. He did the right thing when it counted and then he let go. I never reached out to thank him again. I thought about it. Drafted a message once or twice, but it never felt necessary. He had done his part. He had warned me when no one else would. That was enough. As winter turned to spring, I started building new habits. I went for long walks after work. I lit candles in the evening and read books I'd always put off. I cooked meals without worrying about leftovers going bad in someone else's fridge. I started sleeping better, deeper, like my body finally believed it was safe to rest. I didn't talk about what happened much. Not with coworkers, not with neighbors, not even with close friends unless they asked directly. But when I did share, I spoke plainly. Not from a place of pain, but from a place of ownership. I didn't whisper it like a secret. I stated it like a fact. My family drugged me. They tried to steal from me. I stopped them, and I moved on. Some people looked uncomfortable when they heard that. Some tried to offer justifications. Maybe they were desperate. Maybe they didn't mean to hurt you. But I didn't flinch. I didn't soften the truth to make others more comfortable. Because the truth is, forgiveness doesn't always mean reconnection, and closure doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes closure is choosing yourself. Full stop. That was my story now. I thought there would be a moment, a single defining second, when I'd feel like I had officially let go. But it didn't happen all at once. It happened slowly, quietly, in the ordinary moments. It was the first time I didn't flinch when a mom ringtone came up on someone else's phone. The first time I drove past my childhood street without needing to look. The first time I laughed, really laughed, without feeling guilty for feeling happy while they were probably miserable. And no, it wasn't about getting even. It was about breaking a cycle. I'd spent years thinking I had to earn my place in the family. That being the good daughter meant being the convenient one, the agreeable one, the financially flexible one. But I wasn't raised to be a person. I was raised to be a resource. Not anymore. I wasn't anybody's safety net. I wasn't a lifeline for people who never learned how to swim. I was my own person now, With my own space, my own boundaries, and my own peace. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't. Some days, I still wondered what it would have been like to have a mother who protected me instead of plotting against me, or a father who listened rather than looked the other way. I still wished Lily had grown into someone who could stand on her own without dragging others down. But those were wishes, not regrets. Because when it came down to it, I chose me. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. It was a quiet Saturday morning, the kind where nothing felt urgent. I had just finished a long walk and stopped by the grocery store to pick up a few things. Pasta spinach, a jar of sauce, maybe something sweet if it caught my eye. It was the kind of errand that didn't require thinking. Comfortably mundane, predictably peaceful. I rolled my cart down the household aisle, reaching for a pack of paper towels when I saw her. She was at the end of the aisle, stocking shelves with toilet paper, dressed in a red polo shirt and a navy vest. Her hair was tied back in a low ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup. She didn't notice me at first, or maybe she did, but pretended not to. Her face was turned toward the shelves, eyes fixed on the packaging in front of her, but her body was stiff, tense, like she had sensed something shift in the air. It was Lily. The last time I had seen her, she was standing behind my parents in a softly lit dining room, whispering about my bank information, like it was just another detail to cross off a to-do list. Now she was here working the early shift at a grocery store on the other side of town. Quiet, small, different. For a moment I just stood there, not frozen, not panicked, just still. I didn't feel anger rise up in my chest. I didn't feel the urge to confront her or throw harsh words across the aisle. I didn't feel anything, really. Not in the dramatic, cinematic way I might have imagined once upon a time. Instead, I felt neutral, detached, like I was watching a scene that no longer belonged to me. She shifted slightly, and our eyes met for the briefest moment. Just a flicker. And then she looked away, like the shelf was suddenly fascinating, like she couldn't afford to acknowledge anything else. That was enough. I didn't need her to speak. I didn't need her to explain or apologize or say she regretted everything. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. Maybe stocking paper towels was a temporary job, or maybe it was what her life had become. I didn't know. I didn't ask. I turned my cart and walked away. Down the next aisle, I picked up a jar of marinara and a box of pasta. My hands were steady, my breathing calm. The encounter, if you could even call it that, had lasted less than 30 seconds. But in that short time, something inside me settled. It was over. Fully, finally, quietly over. I paid for my groceries, exchanged polite smiles with the cashier, and stepped out into the cold morning air. The sky was pale blue and the sun was just beginning to peek through a stretch of clouds. Everything felt simple, light, like I'd walked through a storm and come out dry on the other side. For so long I thought cutting ties would destroy me, that turning my back on blood would leave a hole I could never fill. We're taught to believe that family is sacred, that walking away from it is wrong, selfish, ungrateful, that no matter what happens, you're supposed to keep showing up, keep forgiving, keep bleeding quietly. But here's the truth. I've learned sometimes the only way to protect your peace is to walk away from the people who gave you your name. Sometimes survival isn't loud or angry or dramatic. Sometimes it's just leaving the store with your pasta and knowing that you no longer owe anyone an explanation. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's not flinching when you see your sister working a minimum wage job instead of standing beside you asking for more. Sometimes it's letting them live with the consequences they created while you live in freedom. I didn't tell anyone about that morning. Not my friends, not my therapist, not even myself in the usual journal I kept on my nightstand. It didn't feel like a moment that needed to be recorded or dissected. It was just one of those quiet, inevitable collisions that life throws at you when it's ready to show you how far you've come. Because if that had happened a year ago, I might have stopped to talk, to check on her, to ask if she was okay. But not now. Now I knew that kindness without boundaries was just self-destruction dressed up as virtue. Now I knew that real love, doesn't steal from you in your sleep. Now I knew that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself is to leave the past in the aisle behind you. As I drove home, the bag of groceries shifting gently in the passenger seat, I found myself repeating a single thought, one I hadn't fully realized until that morning. I thought cutting off my family would break me. But it didn't. It saved me. And not in some dramatic, movie-worthy phoenix from the ashes kind of way. It saved me in the quiet, everyday way that waking up without dread does. That walking into your own space and knowing it's safe does. That never having to second-guess a phone call does. It gave me peace I didn't think I was allowed to have. It gave me space to rebuild a version of myself that wasn't built on sacrifice or silence. It gave me freedom. And now I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. I'm just done. That chapter is closed. The book is shelved. Whatever comes next, I'll meet it as a whole person, and I'll never again trade that wholeness for anyone. Even those I once called family. So I'll end this with a question, one that's lingered in my mind ever since that day. What do you think? Did I go too far? Or not far enough? Here's a closing that invites empathy, sparks reflection, and encourages interaction in a natural, emotionally resonant tone. If you've ever had to choose peace over family, if you've ever walked away from people who were supposed to protect you, but instead caused harm, you're not alone. Hannah's story is painful, but it also shows the quiet strength it takes to break free from a cycle of betrayal. Have you ever faced a moment where protecting yourself meant letting go of someone you loved? Would you have done the same in her shoes? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your story in the comments and let us know. Did she go too far or not far enough? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story like this one. More tales of survival, truth, and quiet revenge are coming soon.